Okay, so starting off today's show, we will be doing the same thing we do every Tuesday here on the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast, and that is with my top 10 main NFL takeaways of the week. So without further ado, let's get to it. Boys, hit the music. Here we go. Takeaway number one. I think Sean McVay on Saturday really proved once again why he is considered to be one of the best coaches in the NFL. His game plan on Saturday for the Los Angeles Rams was phenomenal. That defense is phenomenal. And one thing I really like about Sean McVay was that he got his team to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and we all remember what ended up happening in that game. Bill Belichick really out-schemed him. The Rams' offense really was not able to do anything, and the New England Patriots ended up winning that game going away. And I think when you look at this Los Angeles Ram team, Sean McVay really has done a great job turning around what exactly this Rams identity is. And that started off when he decided to let Wade Phillips, a coach that as a defensive coordinator has won a Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos and has done many good things throughout his time in the NFL, Sean McVay let him go and brought in a kid in Brandon Staley, former member of Vic Fangio's staff in Chicago and Denver. McVay brought him in, and everyone thought he was crazy. No one knew who exactly this kid Brandon Staley was, and now a year into his tenure as the defensive coordinator as the Los Angeles Rams, he is already getting interviews for a head coaching job, and McVay's game plan on Saturday was phenomenal. He ran circles around Pete Carroll, DK Metcalf, and that Seattle Seahawks squad. Takeaway number two. I think Lamar Jackson really did a good job on Saturday of silencing the critics. He showed you that not only could he win a playoff game, but he could win a playoff game after trailing by 10. And I'm not going to lie, to start off that game, the Tennessee Titans really looked good. They were executing on all cylinders, and I'm not going to lie that I did start to feel a little bit of familiarity in that situation when the Tennessee Titans were up in that game and the pressure was on Lamar Jackson. He really had to show that if the Baltimore Ravens are going to do so much building this offense around him and his skill set, he's really going to have to deliver with it. And that's exactly what he did on Sunday. He really was able to say to the haters, you know what? I'm going to do whatever it takes for me to win a playoff game. So, if I'm not the best passer, and I'm not saying he's a bad passer, that's fine. He knew that he had to run the ball in order to win the game, and that's exactly what he did. The game really changed after Lamar had that big run when Tennessee was up 10-3. Baltimore was really able to turn that game around by scoring a touchdown there, and they really never looked back from there. I was impressed with what I saw from Lamar Jackson. He was super impressive, and I think when you look at the Baltimore Ravens and what exactly they have to do going forward, the game against Buffalo is going to be tough. If they win that, whoever they face off in the AFC Championship game, that's going to be tough. But I do think the Baltimore Ravens right now are a team that when you look at the NFL and you ask, who do you guys want to play? I don't think anyone wants to play the Baltimore Ravens right now. The way that offense is just absolutely humming on all cylinders, I think Lamar Jackson and company do deserve a lot of credit for the way they've played, and he really did silence the doubters. Takeaway number three. I'll give some props to my guy Taylor Heinecke, because there have been many times throughout the NFL playoffs, in my life watching the NFL playoffs, where we've watched a playoff game, and it's a similar situation to what it was going into the game on Saturday night with the Buccaneers and the Washington football team, because you had on one side Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, which very slowly is turning at just the right time into one of the most dynamic offenses in football, and we see that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are really starting to hit on all cylinders. So a lot of people expected with Taylor Heinecke starting this game for the Washington football team and their lack of dynamic playmakers on offense that, okay, maybe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to win this game going away. But that's exactly what did not happen, as even with Alex Smith going out, Taylor Heinecke, I thought, still was able to make the game at least competitive, and he deserves credit for that. He gave the Washington football team a new identity by showing the ability that he had to run the football and providing a threat to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense with his legs. And that touchdown run he had towards the back end of the game was just super, super impressive. And Taylor Heinecke could really play. And he definitely, I thought, made himself a decent amount of money with his performance against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's a backup quarterback next year in the league, I think it's safe to say. And it's just crazy because going into this game, it's not like anyone really had any idea about who Taylor Heinecke was, and if he could even be a quarterback that keeps this game close, let alone competitive. And he did that. He really tried his best going toe-for-toe with Tom Brady in a playoff game. He deserves props. The whole Washington football team deserves props for the season that they've had, and unfortunately they just fell short, but it was a great season in Washington. Takeaway number 4, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the defensive coordinator hires that have been made throughout the past 48 hours. The first one is Dan Quinn going to the Dallas Cowboys. And I'll say this, I don't think this is the best hire, but I certainly think it's an improvement over Mike Nolan. Dan Quinn does at least have the accomplishment on his resume that says that he brought the Atlanta Falcons behind a defense that going into that season when he first got there, no one knew who Grady Jarrett was. No one knew who Deion Jones was. And Dan Quinn did a really good job in getting everyone on that Falcons defense to buy in. And that was one of the better units in football on that side of the ball. They haven't really been the same since Dan Quinn has really elevated and as he's gotten, sturdy and sturdier in that organization. But I do think he will help things for Dallas from a perspective that he's just a fresh voice, better than Mike Nolan. And there are just not many reasons to believe that as bad as Dallas's defense was this past year, I don't necessarily know if they could be as bad again, just because they were historically bad last year, especially throughout the first 8 or so games of the season. I think having a new defensive coach there will help. And then Gus Bradley going to the Raiders, I kind of think it's sort of the same deal. John Gruden made a ballsy move when he decided to fire his own defensive coordinator in Paul Guenther, because Gruden, that's his guy. That's his defensive coordinator. And it was clear that the Raiders defense was just not on an NFL level. And unfortunately, after Guenther was fired, they really weren't able to improve at all. And Gus Bradley is another guy from the Pete Carroll tree. He was their defensive coordinator when the LOB was first there. Same thing can be said about Dan Quinn, also coming from Pete Carroll's staff. So Gus Bradley, he could make the Raiders defense a little more aggressive, maybe, hopefully get them with a little more attitude. But I am still not confident in either one of these teams, the Cowboys or the Raiders, in getting their defense turned around. If I were to have to pick one, I guess I would pick Dallas, just because their defense actually has some talented names. They just need some good coaching. But it's going to be interesting to see how both hires play out. Defensive coordinators, as we know, one of the most important part of the team. Takeaway number 5. Speaking of one of the most important parts of a team, I'll tell you what, if you're a New Orleans Saints fan, I really hope you realize just how important of a player the youngster Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is to your team, because I think it could be officially said that he has mastered the art of trash talking in the NFL, because each and every week I watch the New Orleans Saints play, I feel like he's getting under a new person's skin and a new person's skin and a new person's skin, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. If you remember earlier in the season, the New Orleans Saints had a game, Fox Sunday 4:30 against the Chicago Bears, and that was actually the game where the same Bears receiver, Javon Wims, actually punched him in the face while he was wearing a helmet. No one really knew what happened from there, but Chauncey Gardner-Johnson did a really good job against the Chicago Bears on Sunday, trash talking, getting in some of their heads. You saw Anthony Miller, one of the Bears' top 1 or 2 receivers. He got ejected from the game, and that is all a result of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And the former third-round pick out of Florida has been playing some really good football as of late, and I think he's established, along with Lattimore, in that secondary as one of the better secondary units in the league. You also have Marcus Williams there who's making plays, Malcolm Jenkins there who's making plays, and I did not expect the Saints defense to be this good and this dominant before the season started. They're one of the better defensive units in football, and if they're going to want to win, it's going to be behind guys like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on that side of the ball. Takeaway number 6. Speaking of certain personnel groups that deserve credit in particular, I wanted to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think when people watched that game on Sunday Night Football against the Washington football team, going into that game, one of the big talking points was going to be, how does Tampa Bay's offensive line contain Chase Young and that big-time Washington football team pass rush? Because we've all heard it before. How do you beat Tom Brady in the playoffs? It's very simple, by getting pressure. And I really liked how during their first playoff game together, the franchise's first playoff game in many, many years, I believe 13 years it was exactly, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that offensive line was really able to step up, and they didn't let that Washington football team defensive line even get a hand on Tom Brady, which is ultimately why I do believe the Washington football team won. That was at least a big reason why they won, and I actually really like Tampa Bay's game plan. There was a minute for a second where you thought Washington could be right in the game, but Tampa Bay really did a good job giving Leonard Fournette the ball, and that was a big reason why they won, along with Tom Brady's picture-perfect accuracy. I also wanted to give a quick shout-out to my guy Tristan Wirfs, the rookie first-round pick at right tackle, from the University of Iowa, and he was phenomenal for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team in this game. Keeping up with Chase Young, keeping up with Deron Payne and Montez Sweat. He was phenomenal. He has been a really good pick for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers squad at tackle, and we'll see how it goes. I think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their offensive line knows if you get pressure on Tom Brady, that is what ultimately could be the downfall of the Buccaneers squad. And you know it's Super Bowl or bust when you have a quarterback like Tom Brady. So I'm going to be curious to see if they can continue this big-time play going forward. It was hard, really, not to be impressed. Takeaway number 7. I really hope you guys realized last night watching the game that Matt Nagy and Mitch Trubisky are not the long-term answer in Chicago, and I think Matt Nagy has at least deserved another year by getting the Chicago Bears team to the playoff, and maybe he does deserve a chance to develop and draft his own quarterback, but at the same time, I really hope it's now clear to Chicago Bear fans that they shouldn't be paying Mitchell Trubisky as their franchise quarterback, even if he hits free agency, because it told me a lot before the season started that the Chicago Bears decided to decline Mitchell Trubisky's fifth-year option. That meant he was going to become a free agent after this year, and the reason why they declined that option, it's pretty simple. They just had legitimately no belief at all that he could be the guy, and that was based on what he's done so far as the quarterback of the Chicago Bears. And I'll say this, in this game against the New Orleans Saints, I don't think Matt Nagy's play calling necessarily helped him at all. The Chicago Bears played that game way too conservatively, and if I was the Bears, I understand Mitchell Trubisky's your quarterback, and while you have Matt Nagy calling those kind of conservative plays, I understand that really does tell you all you need to know about the Chicago Bears and where exactly the shape of this team is right now. But at the same time, I will say that I would have liked to see Matt Nagy call that game a little more aggressively, opposed to just having Mitchell Trubisky throw the ball 5 yards maximum. The Bears had no shot to win yesterday based on that game plan, and their defense is a little overrated. I think we could all agree that even though they didn't have Roquan Smith, the Bears' defense was a little bit disappointing. They let Drew Brees really march down the field in the second half, and that was after the game was really close. I mean, that game was 7-3 for a while, and if you're a Bears fan, I just don't understand how you could have any confidence in Matt Nagy or Mitch Trubisky going forward. Takeaway number 8. If anyone doesn't think that culture doesn't matter in the NFL, just look at my guy, and this is takeaway number 7, actually, I'm sorry. Just look at my guy, Kevin Stefanski, because I have been so impressed with the job that he has been able to do so far as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Because let's face facts, what this guy has done since he's been to Cleveland has been phenomenal. In a COVID offseason where he didn't even meet half of his players until camp, Kevin Stefanski has done a phenomenal job doing what a lot of people thought would be the impossible. and that is turning around the Cleveland Browns and turning that organization into a winner. I think it tells you all you need to know that last night, Kevin Stefanski did not even coach the game, and still the Cleveland Browns and their culture were really one of the reasons why they won that game. Stefanski and the culture that he's established has really rubbed off on the Cleveland Browns, and it's rubbed off on their quarterback. You don't see Baker Mayfield out here chirping at the media. You rarely hear his name in the news anymore unless it's for playoff wins, and the game plan was phenomenal. This was a Cleveland Brown team that didn't even have the ability to practice this week, and they still came out and really, it was never a doubt to me, we're the better team than the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we're going to get into this game a little bit more specifically from a Steelers perspective going forward. But I do believe that if you are a Cleveland Brown fan, you have to love that Kevin Stefanski is your head coach right now. And he has done a phenomenal job turning that culture around in Cleveland. He's going to be the head coach there for a very long time. He deserves a lot of credit. Takeaway number 9. The Indianapolis Colts Buffalo Bills wildcard game was really good, and I think if I was a Buffalo Bills fan, it may have been a little bit too close for comfort. Because right now, to me, watching that game, the Indianapolis Colts easily could have won it, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say that the Indianapolis Colts played better in that game. And I think the reason why the Buffalo Bills won was because they have a special player behind center at quarterback. Josh Allen was really able to make throw after throw after throw, and that really was one of the main reasons why the Buffalo Bills won the game, because they had a quarterback that was able to make the big play when necessary, and that's what put them over the top. Frank Reich didn't coach his best game as a play caller for Indianapolis, but at the same time, I'll never fault him for being aggressive. I just didn't love the play calling execution part of it. I would have, maybe called a different play than going for Pittman in the back of the end zone. But Josh Allen is a player that Buffalo Bill fans are really starting to realize how lucky they are to have him. And I am the first one to admit it. I say it every week. I did not buy the Josh Allen hype, but the jump he has made from year 2 to year 3 has been remarkable. I don't think anyone could have ever expected him to be this good this quickly in such a short amount of time. And Sean McDermott, once again, he is one of the best coaches in the league. He really did a nice job, along with Brian Daboll, establishing a game plan to get his quarterback going. And I think it's so nice for Buffalo Bill fans to finally realize that you have a franchise changer at quarterback that really on any given day will give you an ability to win, even when you don't play at your best. And I think that's really what happened to this Buffalo Bills team on Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts. They were phenomenal. You really liked the way they were able to play with Indianapolis and really establish themselves even when they didn't necessarily play their best game. So a really nice job by the Bills. They will host Baltimore on Sunday night in the divisional round. And takeaway number 10, that was the worst loss by far of the Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson era in Seattle. I understand there are no fans, and that really affected many teams in many different ways, but I totally understand the argument of having no fans really hurt Seattle the most, because we all know how loud the Legion, the 12th man could be, but that's not an excuse for the way the Seattle Seahawks played on Saturday against the Los Angeles Rams. Russell Wilson went 11 for 27, and I have a feeling that he's going to continue this season the trend of him never receiving an MVP vote, because early on in the season, everyone was trying to give Russell Wilson the MVP during Week 3 and Week 4. During what other season do we start talking about the MVP during Week 3 or Week 4? I always thought the Russell Wilson MVP talks were getting a little bit out of hand, and at the same time, the Seattle Seahawks, it was a disappointing effort. Sean McVay and Brandon Staley coached circles around Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer, who, let's face facts, is this really the right play caller for Seattle? I understand Russell wasn't good and DK Metcalf is out here on the sidelines throwing fits, but where is the creativity? Where did the Seattle Seahawks ever put a player in motion? And Pete Carroll is a coach that a lot of people have said, oh, he's too old. I never am really sure if the game has passed him by. I don't think he's the problem. I just think that he may need to hire a new offensive coordinator that is a little more modern and is a little more dynamic in terms of putting his players in motion. And I think Pete Carroll needs a guy that knows how to get the best out of Russell Wilson. I'll give the Seahawks credit in the sense that their defense was really able to improve as the season went on, but the fact that what we thought was their strong suit, the Seahawks offense, was this bad, this quickly, especially when you consider the fact that early on in the season, Russell was in the MVP conversation, this season is definitely a failure for Seattle.